Are you looking for ways to shorten your marketing learning curve and help your organization survive and thrive? Welcome to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast, a show for purpose-focused leaders who want to use marketing techniques to fuel their organization's growth. If you're a returning listener and you haven't subscribed already, we'd love to have you. Also, please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Now here's your host, author and marketing specialist, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here. My guest today is Jeff Kinsey. He's the founder and CEO of the Logos Group. And the Logos Group provides strategic planning and executive coaching to people in the nonprofit space, as well as purpose-driven organizations and leaders, and really trying to help people figure out how to change their mindset, how to make sure that they're working at their best so that they can help be the most effective leader possible. He does this through a variety of really cool means and techniques, including sometimes going out in the woods with his coachees and spending some time just wandering around in the woods. Jeff lives up by me, so this was my first in-person show, so I hope that it comes through okay. But we had a really great time talking with one another. We both love the outdoors and love being able to really supercharge our impact and our ability to help others. And he's just a great guy. I hope you enjoy our talk today. I know I certainly did. And here we go. Enjoy the show. Jeff, how are you today?
Doing great, Stu.
Well, I appreciate you meeting me down here in Nederland, beautiful Nederland, Colorado. It's a gorgeous fall day today. We were both doing that mountain thing where trying to figure out bandwidth and internet and all that fun stuff. It's always a challenge. So thank you for meeting me here today.
Works out perfect. We actually get to sit across from each other and talk.
Yeah, it's great. I haven't done a live one like this yet. So you're my first guinea pig. So hopefully this will be awesome and everyone will enjoy it. I'm sure they will. I'm really excited to have you share your story and how you help nonprofits, navigate the space and make leaders of all types better leaders. So that's what your jam is, right?
It is. I think so. That's what I try to make it, at least. And I guess there's a bit of arrogance in there that I try and avoid. But I had this experience, if you will, of my first career where I worked for Wall Street banks for 20 years. And, I tell the story about how banks don't really produce anything, but they persuade people. So they end up being laboratory really for how to engage effectively with people. And I learned in my 20 years how people work effectively together and then how we work intrinsically as well. So being able to take that experience and really apply it to the nonprofit ecosystem here in Denver, where you have a lot of folks that are very passionate about what they do, don't necessarily have a real high level of business acumen. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, are faced with doing a lot of things themselves and face a lot of stress and burnout. Really what I try and do is take these people skills that I developed, working for banks and apply them to the nonprofit space to make sure that the people that are passionate about changing lives in the community continue to do that and don't burn out and go back to the private sector.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many great nonprofits here in the area. Boulder is just steeped with nonprofits. Denver has a huge nonprofit community. And then, just so many purpose-driven leaders as well. And yeah, it feels like there's so many businesses, mine included, that started out with just an idea, didn't really do the stuff up front. And then, you're 2 or 3 years in and it's like, wait a minute, what am I supposed to be doing here? So having someone on your team, an early phase of that growth can be such an important thing to engage. When did you move away from banking?
So that was probably close to 10 years ago. Okay. And I'd really taken about 20 years, moved around various banks, trying to find a culture really that resonated with me. And it was a challenge. What I found instead was that there were a lot of folks doing the same thing I was, trying to find some place where they really felt like they could make a difference, where they were valued, where the suggestions they had would be taken seriously. And really in the banking world, when you've got 40 layers of management, any idea is a risk, right? Something that's for the most part to be avoided. So I just never really found a home in that space. And we would always try and talk ourselves into some level of satisfaction with helping rich people get richer. Mm-hmm. And that just didn't really do it for me. When I got out of banking and actually got into raising money to build affordable housing, that changed my life completely. Right. I went from, again, trying to justify making rich people richer to giving people a home that had never had a home before. And that was extraordinary to see that kind of impact. And that led me to look into how I could apply the skill set that I have and the things I know to help other nonprofit leaders like that. Right. Started volunteering in prison, teaching entrepreneurship in prison, helping an organization that does that to do it more effectively and transition through a leadership change that they were going through. And I found that there's this fantastic space here in Denver that's very intimate in the nonprofit world. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody's there to help each other out. We're all trying to make the community a better place for all the members of it.
And I spent a little bit of time looking into the prison nonprofit area that you're working in. Tell us a little bit more about that. It seems just really interesting, that work that you're doing.
It is. No, I appreciate that. And I can't take a whole lot more credit for it other than it was something that really spoke to me. I try and live my life to not succumb to fear, if you will. If I get afraid of something, I like to go at it. Right. And a maximum security prison was one of those things that I had some fear around. And when the opportunity presented itself to get involved, I jumped on it. My background in business and entrepreneurship, being able to help folks that are being released not go back again. If I could help them with a skill set where they could at least have the confidence to go out and get a job, let alone start a business, I was all over that opportunity. And what I found when I went into prison was that it's this incredible well of human spirit. And I've become a human spirit junkie. And I love to go in and meet these incredible men and women that have a lot to add to the community. And for whatever reason, typically some sort of institutional racism, they don't have that opportunity, to really add the value that they want to the community.
Well, it's so interesting how, as a society, we look at prison as, a punishment as well as serving this time that's supposed to clean the slate, but that's just not how it works for most of the people who go into that system. They come out and they're still ostracized and aren't able to get jobs and are constantly having to say, yes, I've had a felony. And then that keeps them from getting hired when, really it's you've done your time. We should be giving people, that next chance, or that hopefully second, but maybe third or even fourth chance. I mean, As a society, that's how it's supposed to work. But it's just really frustrating that it doesn't work that way. So it's cool to hear you helping with skill building while they are incarcerated and then after the fact, or how's the program set up?
Really a combination of both. And I think, the idea is 90% of these folks are going to get out. Who do you want to come out? The most rehabilitated person that really understands themselves and doesn't want to be part of that old life that put them in? Or do you want somebody that's just been totally forgotten, treated like an animal, comes out, does something else, and ends up going back in again? We would be better off if every member of our community is as strong as possible. So, we start on the inside and typically try and focus on folks that have a chance of release in the next 8 months, because it's an 8-month program, cohort type program. We'll go inside and help them to develop business ideas, help them with interview skills and resume building and, really self-confidence at the end of the day. So when they come out, they know that they have some options. And then when they do get out, that we have a post-release program as well to support them along the way. They get very little support on the way out. And it's a very daunting place on the outside. If you've been in a maximum security prison for 20 years, you don't really know what the internet is. And now you come out and everything is internet based. And it's what do you do? How do you find a job? How do you interact with anybody really on the outside? So we try to provide a lot of support on the tactics of just getting IDs and phones and computers and things like that, and how to go about finding a job these days. And also a lot of, mental health support. It's a terrifying place on the inside and the outside. So, trying to help these folks really be as supported as possible so they know they have people that care about them, and continue to provide skills to them to reintroduce them to society where they want to be, productive members.
Right. Is your role in that mostly in a kind of the same capacity in terms of coaching and life skills and confidence and all those things that you just mentioned? Is that where you're landing in that scenario?
There's this piece that's business related, right? If somebody wants to start a business, or even if somebody wants to get a job, there's the fundamental nuts and bolts of business plans and resumes and things like that. But in the end of the day, the experience that we have is how we make meaning out of our circumstances through thought. And that's the coaching that I do, to help you or to help them understand sort of what their options are within the way they experience life. And they don't have to get all wrapped up in negative thinking about stuff that went wrong or what they did. They have a choice. They have options to sort of let those thoughts go by and wait for the next one, because we know there's always a next thought and it might be better than the last one. So why don't we just be curious about it and see what happens?
Yeah. I mean, you certainly have the opportunity to kind of create your own reality in terms of the voice in your head, right? Because the voice in your head doesn't have to be you, that you have actual control over saying, oh, there's that voice again, and I'm going to choose to ignore it, or I'm going to listen to it for a little while and laugh at it and kind of make fun of it. And then maybe it'll go away. But it's just fascinating when you start to do that kind of work and be able to experience how you can just change the situation just by how you approach it and how you create it. I can imagine that a lot of people are just in these situations because they made a big mistake. Like you said, there is some institutional racism and other classism and other things like that put people in these positions where either they're making big, dumb decisions or being overly punished for some of these things. And so I'm sure that a lot of these guys and gals, sit with a lot of guilt and feelings of that stuff. And so getting them over that has got to be just a real rewarding experience.
It's tremendous to help somebody understand that really the pain and suffering that they've been putting themselves through is optional. And that if they think about it from a little different perspective, put a little different light on it, look forward instead of back, changes the way they walk through life. And they're able to walk through life with a level of grace that they didn't know was possible because they had been living in this world of turmoil without understanding that, they were really one thought away from being outside of that space.
Do most people coming out of prison, are they looking for employment opportunities? Are a lot of them wanting to become entrepreneurs? What's the mix? Is it very similar to on the outside?
That's probably a fair way to look at it. Typically, when you're released, you have nothing, right? And you're required through parole to have a job. You need to have some form of income or employment. So there's typically an initial push to find employment. And there's organizations that are very good at combining or matching up, employers that are willing to hire folks with felonies with those folks. And there's a lot of training that goes on both sides of the coin there, to help employers understand what it's really like to employ somebody that maybe has been incarcerated for a period of time, and then to help the employees understand what it's like to work for somebody. What we find is that people that have been released from prison are extremely good employees. They're very loyal. The last thing they want to do is go back to prison. And they also want to prove something, right? They want to prove that they're not really that representative of probably the biggest mistake they made in their life, that's not all they should be known for. So they're very motivated to get out, get into the world, start making some money. That typically comes from employment as opposed to starting a business. But it's amazing the skill set that these guys have. We joke a bit about how they were running these large illicit organizations oftentimes, right? There are entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs, they're managers, they're salesmen. They have all these skill sets. So let's take those things, have some confidence that you are good at that, and apply it to something that's legitimate.
Right.
And maybe that's starting a business. There's a lot of support structure that's out there for folks like that. That, it's obviously, if it's that hard to find a job with a felony, imagine how hard it is to raise money with a felony.
Right.
So, there's supports out there to help with that as well. And, when you come out of this program, the business that you have decided to do a business plan on has to have certain requirements, like a minimum cash investment requirement. Mm-hmm. It has to be something that turns cash over very quickly. So these parameters are really to set these folks up so when they get out, they have the best chance for success in the shortest period of time, because the clock is clicking, the clock is ticking as soon as they walk out.
Right. Wow, that's really great. I had Tamara Ryan on. She's from the Women's Bean Project, and I know that they do a ton of work in a similar space where they're at least giving people employment coming out of prison, kind of like a buffer to get them trained up in terms of like how to actually hold a job and all of the things that go into that are so foreign if you've been incarcerated for a period of time. It's cool to hear another approach to that that's also aligned with that kind of idea of getting these people back into the workforce.
Right. But, it all comes down to knowing that you have options. It's like the worst thing you can face as a human is the feeling of being trapped. And you get released. You figure nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody wants to employ you. Nobody wants to deal with you. You have no options. And then it makes it really easy to fall back into some of the things you might have done before, even though that's what gave you 20 years of incarceration. So to be able to give them options, and it could even be just an understanding that I can do more than that, is an option enough to keep people, really moving in a legitimate path. And Women's Bean is this great example of a support system, really. You learn a lot of skills, but you also have support of peers, people that have gone through the same kind of thing, that you don't feel alone. You don't feel like you're trapped. You feel like, you've got options and you've got a team to support you to get there.
Are there opportunities for nonprofits to take advantage of, but to leverage kind of this program in terms of bringing people on to help them fulfill their mission? Is that something that, one of the things that I'm curious about is there's a certain level of fear, I think, probably from business owners and entrepreneurs who have businesses on bringing a formerly incarcerated person on to join their team. What are some of the tools or some of the things that people can do to get past that or bring these kind of people into their organizations?
A lot of the work that I'm doing at the organizational level these days is around cultural derivation, really understanding what the innate culture of your organization is. And part of that is understanding who your stakeholders are, right? Who all is involved in this organization. You've got board, ED, staff, volunteers, and then the people that you serve. What we're learning is that, the more your organization can represent the stakeholders that you serve, the better you are at serving that population. So there's a push now, especially on the nonprofit side, to try and make everything they do really mirror the populations that they're serving. Mm-hmm. And they're finding that kind of diversity and inclusion really works, right? You get a much broader input, a much more informed input into how to run the organization. So the opportunities are definitely out there. And in the nonprofit space in Denver, people are starting to look to where they can find other resources that can really help build out diversity and inclusion that they're starting to understand is so valuable. And then there's a lot of experts that are in the space that understand how homeless employees and formerly incarcerated employees are treated differently. So there's resources out there to help employers understand these people are probably safer, right? They might show up a couple minutes late here and there because their lives are so different than, a normal 9 to 5 kind of, you get up in your house and you go off to work. That's not the way these folks' lives usually work. So, having an understanding and then an empathy towards that, really helps. And then you have the experience, right? You hire somebody, it works better than you thought it would because your expectations were so low. And then you're like, oh, I want to hire some more of these folks because they really are fantastic employees.
So are there opportunities for people kind of in all sectors, like in tech, in service, in nonprofit, et cetera? Are there people who match those types of positions in terms of skill sets?
There are, absolutely. One of the primary firms that's out running around right now is a company called Honest Jobs. Okay. And Honest Jobs is a high-tech electronic billboard version of an employee database that is really geared towards finding employment for the formerly incarcerated. Okay. It's a broad database of folks looking for jobs and a broad database of employers that understand the benefits of employing people that are formerly incarcerated or homeless. And it's a wide range of industries. And tech is a big one, right? Tech is something where, for the most part, anybody can learn to code. There's a lot of coding training that goes on in prisons so that folks can do that when they get released. There's a lot of traditional sort of labor jobs too, but it runs the gamut and some decent paying jobs as well. So there's a wide variety of things for folks to do.
A lot of times we talk about mission alignment and whether that's you bringing in corporate sponsor to your nonprofit or even bringing in employees. If there's a way to align what you're doing with that mission so that there's not a huge disconnect, that's when the kind of the magic happens, right? So if you are an organization that helps kids get into the outdoors, finding a corporate sponsor that would help, would be really aligned with that kind of mission is kind of a win-win for everybody versus just bringing in I'll just say, bringing in the North Face to that kind of equation rather than a bank. And not that banks are bad, but that's just the example I'll use. But rather than a bank, that one of those makes a lot more sense than the other. And so if your mission is around homelessness or incarceration or things of that nature, tapping into this group of people who have had that experience, I think that would be a wonderful way to just further that mission and really demonstrate that you're living that.
One of the things that we're trying to do in the nonprofit space is change the funding model. Traditionally, as you know, nonprofits primarily seek funding from foundations through grants. And then they become, it's just like a for-profit. They become dependent on that revenue stream. And if that stream happens to change for any reason, and of course, in COVID, we've seen the foundation demographic or marketplace, what have you, change quite a bit. So it's important for these nonprofits to have a variety of revenue streams, just like a for-profit was. And so when you flip that model upside down and you bring corporations in with their giving mandates, so many of these corporations, they understand that they want to make impact, but they don't know exactly what that means. So they have a pretty significant impact mandate, but they don't know how to execute on it. So one of the things I try and do is connect those sorts of corporate sponsors with these nonprofits in a way that is really aligned with the mission of both of those organizations. And you'll get somebody like Google that'll send a team of volunteers. The volunteers show up, they do a lot of work for the nonprofit, and then Google will write a check to the nonprofit based on the salary that each one of those volunteers basically used in that volunteer effort, right? So that ends up combining these two different pieces of the community in a really interesting way. And I talk about how awareness comes from exposure. I mean, I like to take other folks into prison so they can see that these men and women are just phenomenal human beings, so that they maybe change the way they vote. Maybe they change the way they advocate for certain things on the outside. When you have volunteers that go out into the space and work in the community, not necessarily just in a soup kitchen, but maybe out in a park, just talking to homeless folks about what their experience has been, that creates a level of understanding that builds community in and of itself.
It's just remarkable how much more you can advance an entire program if there's that alignment. Like you said, if you take something like a volunteer opportunity where there's a salary match component to it, you're getting not only workers, but you're also getting some money. So that's a really cool way for a nonprofit to kind of double down on some things. I know people look at kind of these revenue sources and revenue streams, and it's really interesting to me when a nonprofit can diversify that and can really look at how do we bring in, a retail component to our nonprofit so that there's that as a revenue stream. So we're not just relying on small individual donations, corporate donations, and grants to fuel all the work that we're doing. But yeah, thinking about it from a volunteer standpoint as well, I mean, that's just a really cool way to kind of double down on that.
Yeah. Two things that nonprofits are always short on are resources of human and financial nature, right? So if you can solve both of those issues and build community at the same time, it is that triple bottom line, win-win-win, across the board.
Walk me through what it looks like for a nonprofit or for-profit leader to work with you. What's the program look like, outside of prison, I guess?
Depends a bit on how I come into the organization. I look at an organization as an organism, just like I look at the leader as an organism. And it's a cultural thing, right? So the organization has a culture that's made up of really the combination of the personalities of the leadership team. In a small nonprofit, that's usually the founding executive director, right? That's the culture of the organization, is the personality of that individual. Let's figure out what that is, right? What is that personality? How are they really running this organization? And let's set up the infrastructure of that organization to mirror the culture of the person at the top, right? And that ends up resulting in a pretty good flowing organization, right? The individual's hiring people that he resonates or she resonates with. Those people are staying, and the turnover is a lot lower because they are all mission aligned and the same page and what have you. And that tends to be a nice way to go through it. At the same time, we have some mindset issues, always issues around the way we make meaning out of our experiences, right? Maybe I'll come in from the leadership side where I've been referred into an executive director that's having a hard time with this or that or what have you. We start this coaching program where we're getting together typically once a week for an hour, and we're talking about what their experiences have been. What did they face in the last week? How did that affect them personally? What kind of stress did they have around that? And how can we sort of pull those thoughts apart and see whether there's options? Again, it's all about options. If I understand that I'm really stressed out about this particular thing, but if I just let it go by and I let my mind calm down a little bit, and in that clarity, there's some fresh thinking that comes in about, I could solve this problem that way. Well, that's a huge win, right? I mean, you're not wrapped around the axle in your head about, this is just not going to work out. Why am I doing this? Now you're like, I have options. I'm curious about what those can be. In that curious space is where life is lived, really. It's really enjoyable. It's no longer this huge roadblock. It's this challenge, and I can't wait to get over it.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone the other day. He called me up and asked me for some consultation or advice because his number two had asked for a leave of absence for some mental health challenges that he was having a lot of anxiety and just was not functioning as well as he wanted to, and was feeling like he needed to have a break. And my friend was understandably concerned about how this was going to affect his business. He has a small business, and losing the number two guy for a couple of months was definitely going to have a significant impact on things. And so one of the first things that we talked about was just mindset shift in terms of, what kind of opportunities potentially could arise from this, whether they're learning opportunities or reinforcing your culture opportunities. Like, what kind of message can you turn this into for the rest of your team and the rest of your stakeholders? Because, frankly, we have our team, we have vendors, we have our clients, we have, potentially board members and investors and all of those people. There's an opportunity here to really, instead of having this be this thing that just causes a bunch of panic and creates, a bunch of chaos within the company, there's an opportunity to just say, okay, well, this actually aligns really well with these values that we've put forth as part of our mission. And so it's really cool when you can take that break and you can take that step back and really just see how come at things from a different perspective to turn what seems like a negative into a positive.
It's so easy to look out into the unknown and create this narrative within your head that's worst case scenario. It's this funny thing that's how we think about it. We're always doing the best we can in the moment. And we need to give ourselves the benefit of doubt that we're doing the best we can in the moment. And that when we look out into the unknown, oftentimes, our ego will try and protect us by creating this horrible story, so that we'll just go hide in the corner and wait for it all to go away. But you're absolutely right. There's always an opportunity out there. So if you understand that your ego is just creating the story to try and protect you, that it doesn't have any bearing in reality. Right. It's just a story between your ears, right? Then you can sort of put that aside and say, well, what can I learn from this? How can I reinforce my mission, right? These are questions of curiosity, right? And from that space is all this wonderful opportunity, right? It's like, how can we even be better? You're not even thinking about, those horrible stories that you were telling yourself before. It's like, here's this fantastic opportunity to even strengthen our company more.
Yeah. Our initial response to change is always like, well, how is this going to negatively affect what I do and how I do it? Or, how is this going to make my life worse? And there's always that opportunity. It's like, well, it's either going to do that or it's not going to do that. And we don't really know because that's in the future. Yeah. And so let's tackle that when it happens.
I love asking people, how good have you been at predicting the future in the past? We're horrible fortune tellers. So if I think something's going to happen, chances are that's the last thing that's going to happen. Because I just know that there's a million different things that could happen, and I picked one. Chances are not in my favor that that's the way it's going to shake out. Yeah. So then I get curious about, well, what is going to shake out? Yeah. Right. And then it's fun trying to find out, see what's ahead and what can I do to make it even better, to inform a better outcome.
It's amazing the tricks that our brains play on us.
And nobody ever shares with us that that's what's actually happening, right? Yeah. It's either something we're lucky enough to figure out on our own if we're really paying attention, or, somebody like you or I need to have a conversation with this individual and be like, well, this is how it's all working. And these are, in a way, what your controls are within the space of your own mind.
Yeah. It's amazing to me. I was actually talking with someone yesterday about marketing and about marketing my own business and how, I'm pretty good at marketing and coming up with ideas about other people's businesses. But then when it comes to mine, there's like this blinders on and I get way in the weeds and all of those things. And so just having someone there, which is the role that you fill as a coach, is just having someone there to be able to bounce an idea off of, or to say, hey, talk me down from this ledge a little bit here because I'm freaking out about X, Y, or Z. The benefits having that kind of peer group that's open and honest and able to be transparent, or a coach, is invaluable. I've been fortunate enough to be in quite a few different peer groups that weren't all I have to put on this facade. I have to say that everything's always amazing, which is it seems like that's changing a little bit, or maybe it's just the people I run with. But I can remember 20 years ago, the attitude was, the CEO just never showed any sort of weakness. And and everything was always great. And you never showed that anything could harm you, even if things were terrible. And it feels at least the people I'm running with, that's changing quite a bit.
Vulnerability is the new buzzword, right?
That's true.
It's like, how can we be vulnerable? We don't necessarily know what that means until somebody starts crying in front of us. We're like, oh, there it is. And it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And if we're in connection with that human, the empathy comes very easily. And from that place, we can talk about some really cool things, right? So it's a matter of not necessarily, the old CEO version of, there's no crying in baseball. I've got to have a stiff upper lip. It's inhumane. It's not only inhumane, it's a social construct of the modern era. This hasn't been the way humans have operated. It's this very odd world that we live in now. And we're seeing the results of that, right? The suicide rate for white men 50 to 54 is just through the roof. Right. This is the time when we're realizing that we need to be as human with each other as possible. Right. And when we give into that humanity, beautiful things come from it. The CEO that can sit down with their team and say, how are you really doing today?
Right.
Really, how are you doing? How are you feeling? That's the CEO that has a team that will do anything for them, right? And they do it together, which is fantastic. It's not following a leader that's running ahead with a flag in their hand. I mean, that was the leadership model that I was raised in, that it was our team against their team, some sort of combat. And that's just simply not true. Us sitting down as a group and coming up with the best thing that we can possibly do together is what really produces a competitive product or service.
I think that there's this island syndrome that happens when you're out there and you're an entrepreneur or an organization leader and you think that this is the first time anyone has experienced this particular challenge. And it's just not. I mean, there are not that many unique business challenges that haven't been overcome by somebody at some point in time. And so being able to share that experience that you're having and have other people there who are willing to say, yeah, I went through that 2 years ago, and here's how I managed to get out of it. Or it's hard, but it's get out of the bowl. That's just such a valuable thing. I would encourage everyone out there to be willing to share some of those challenges that they're going through, because there are solutions to pretty much everything.
And we all benefit from not struggling through those, trying to come up with them again. And we still have to do the work. Yeah. It's not like we really get out of anything by having somebody help us understand what we're facing. I used to want to be a CEO, and then I had the opportunity to work with a lot of CEOs, and I realized it's one of the worst jobs you could have, because everybody's lying to you. They're either trying to build themselves up or they're trying to hide something from you they don't want you to know. Right. So you have such limited information. And then you only have to work on with what's in your head, Right. And we know from Einstein that we can't solve the problem in the same plane it was created. We need somebody to talk to. We drive ourselves nuts talking to ourselves, right. And the solution to the problem isn't within our heads. We have to talk to people, right. And it's got to be a safe space. And I think that's probably the number one thing, most important thing I do, is create a safe space for a conversation where you can be vulnerable. You can say whatever you want, and you, in a way, can get away with it. And that's how we get to the deepness, the meaning of what's going on behind it. And that's how we resolve problems. When you start to understand how you're making meaning of these things, then again, you can see where your options are. And the light comes on, the world opens up, you breathe easier, you walk with the lightness in your step. All that stuff is real. And it happens when we see what's really going on around us from this more of an observer perspective.
And just getting that set of eyes from the outside perspective, I think, is super important, because we're like in this cage of our own thought and challenges and all of those things. Just having someone outside being like, you know what, there's a door right here. Right. It's amazing how much benefit that can bring to everyone's life, I think. I'm sure that you would like to work with kind of everyone, but at some point there's a good fit, right, for a coach. What are some of the things that you would encourage people to do if they're looking for a business coach such as yourself? What are the questions they should be asking themselves in order to find the right person?
It's a great question, and something that comes up pretty regularly, especially now. Coaching is a thing, right? It used to be the coaching was something that maybe your company provided if you weren't behaving properly, right, to try and help you out. It was some sort of behavioral adjustment process. And it's not anymore. Now we recognize that it's very helpful to talk to somebody about what's going on in your head. And I think that's the answer to your question in a way is, go out and talk to a couple of different coaches Figure out who it is that you really identify with, because that's who's going to be able to really get in and figure out what's going on, and be open, be vulnerable. You're not doing anybody any favors by putting on a front. If the coach is any good, they're going to get right behind that anyways. Sure. And you might find out that it's not a good match. So I wouldn't focus on things like certifications, a certain type of coaching certification. You really want to find a good personal connection, but you also want to know that somebody's been doing this for a while, maybe has some experience in it. So look around, talk to a couple of different folks, at least 3, to get a good sample of what kind of resonates with you. And then talk to some people that they've coached before and get a better sense of, what the process is and whether or not that fits with what you're trying to do.
Right. So I'm sure that people are listening and thinking, okay, well, that sounds great, but what is this going to require from me, both from time and money investment? And I don't mean just your services necessarily, but what should people expect to invest in this type of work?
It reminds me of a conversation I had with a marketer recently. This isn't something that people are used to buying. People that are used to buying something, they've already decided they like pants. It's really easy to buy pants. You just go out and you find the size and the color that you're interested in. Coaching's a little bit different. We don't have a lot of experience buying coaching services. It's a bit of an unknown, and it takes a little bit more time and intimacy maybe to get to that point. So the time and the expense has a lot to do with what you need to get out of it, right? Are we going to be meeting once a week? Or are we going to be meeting once a month? Is this kind of helping you get through some things, a couple of things here and there, just some fine tuning? Or is this a full scale transformation from a founder to a CEO? And then it, typically comes down to a package or an hourly thing, something, at least from my perspective, I want us to make a commitment to each other. And I want that to be at least 3 months, because we're going to have our good days and our bad days, both of us. Right. And if we have a bad day, session 2, I want you just pulling the plug and running away. Right. There's a reason that we're working together. So let's make a commitment to seeing that through. And I know, at least from my perspective, I talk a lot with clients about the illusion of money. So pricing to me has to follow along that mission alignment as well. So I price my services based in large extent on what you can afford. I don't want you to make a decision not to work with me because of money. So I have a sliding scale that slides really far, because if I like you and you like me, and I think I can really help you, and I think you've really got something going on, then we'll figure out a way, to pay for it.
I know of coaches that are $200,000 a year. Obviously, there are coaches like you who are donating at least a portion of their time to help people who truly can't afford the, a monetary commitment right at this moment, and probably everywhere in between it, I'm sure.
It's a big thing with equity in our society today, right? Some people can go out and afford a $200,000 a year coach, and they probably get phenomenal service for that. But that is a privilege that very few people can afford. If I can take the same coaching that I provide to executive directors and CEOs and give it to people that just were released from prison, there's a level of equity in there that is really important to me. I want to help as many people as I can understand how they're making meaning and how they can avoid stress in those situations. It doesn't matter to me really who they are. I'm trying to help as many people as I can.
It's really fascinating. And my experience has been that I tend to perform at a different level, higher level, when I do have coaching attached. And whether that's in a physical type of scenario, like running a marathon or finishing Leadville, or in a business capacity, or even just a life capacity. When I have people on my team who are helping me look out for my best me and encouraging me and keep holding me accountable, that in my experience has been really powerful for me. For anyone out there listening who hasn't tried coaching, I would say that it's something to definitely look into, because it can be just an incredible experience to just have someone on your team looking out for you and pushing you to be your best you.
It's an exponential thing. It really is the 1 + 1 = 3. You can do the best you can, but it's amazing how a little input from the outside can help. And I always tell my clients that when we're done here, you'll be in a position to make a lot more money than whatever you paid me. Yeah. And that's because of that exponential component of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other thing too, I know that this is not unique to me, but entrepreneurs, we have a tendency to not only move the goalposts, but we also have a tendency to never celebrate, even when we have actually crossed whatever finish line it is. It's like, oh yeah, well, I was, that was what I was supposed to do. That was the goal I set for myself. So it's not like, let's go have a party. But the other tendency is to get to the 90-yard mark and be like, oh, well, I was going to do X, but I'm so close, I'm just going to up that to X plus 30% or whatever. And then once we get to close to the X plus 30%, we kick that goalpost on down the field. And so having a coach there to really help you like see how far you've come and not necessarily always be looking at how much farther you have to go or even that you have something left on the table there, but take a peek back at how far you've come. And that's just one of those other things that coaches can really help with a lot, because I think we have a tendency to not celebrate and never get to that end.
And nobody's better at giving ourselves a hard time than ourselves, Absolutely. And a huge part of being a coach is being a cheerleader. And that cheerleading is reminding you, remember where we started and see where we are now. And then really encourage you, give yourself a good pat on the back, go out and have some ice cream, whatever it is, take a day off, go climbing, whatever that might be. Yeah. But it's super important to, that's where you get energy, that recharge, reminding yourself that I'm doing a great job here. This is cool stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. We were taught in this sort of military industrial sort of age that, we never give ourselves credit because there's always some enemy down the road that we've got to battle next.
Yeah. Or we could have always done better, right? It's like, well, I did my best, but I could have done better.
No, and that's an easy thing to say in hindsight, but I do believe we do the best we can in the moment, every moment.
Yeah. One of my coaches is always encouraging me to not only, and this is the way that I create myself daily, is one of the things that I say about the way that I want to be and show up, is that I know everything's going to be okay, because ultimately I'm 52 years old. Whatever I did to get where we are today worked, right? And so it's going to keep working, and not to get too caught up in all of the what ifs and those types of things that ultimately, we have the ability to create our experience. And one of the ways that I do that for myself is to know that everything's going to be okay. That was a powerful lesson that he helped me come to.
If you get there and it's not okay, it's the way you're thinking about it. What expectations did you set that you didn't meet for yourself? I love that. An expectation is this sort of line you draw in the sand in your head, and then you judge yourself on whether or not you met that imaginary line. And then if you feel like you didn't, then you give yourself a hard time about it. And this entire conversation is happening between your ears, and you're the one that's suffering as a result of it. It's like, why are you doing that? It's like, why bother? You did the best you could. These are the results of it. That's how life showed up for you. Make whatever meaning out of it that you want, see what you can learn from it, and then let's move on. Yeah. Because there's something else super cool right around the corner.
Absolutely. He also talks a lot about being committed to things, right? And if you say that you're committed to something, but it's not happening, then it's just that you're committed to something else. And so figuring out what that other thing is that you're committed to, and whether that's, making a bunch of money or having a great relationship or finishing a race at a certain time, or even just, committing to preparing yourself for those activities. And if it's not getting done, it's like, there's something else there that's taking precedent. So it's not even necessarily that you're not committed to this thing. It's just that you're committed to something different.
Right.
So, we all have our commitments that we
think we're a failure if we back out on a commitment that we made at a time we didn't know what was going to happen. Right. So now we're there, and it turns out that what we thought was going to happen is different than what's actually happening. It's like, well, then why stick with that commitment? There's something else going on, to your point. So enjoy that. Right. I mean, it's so funny because it's so easy to be like, oh, well, I guess I'm not doing that. Let's go do this. And now you're excited to go do this, whatever that is. Right. And you're not beating yourself up about not being committed to that anymore.
Right.
Why bother beating yourself up when you can just enjoy whatever's next?
Yeah. It's fascinating how much we can beat ourselves up over little things, just how many different options there are for us out there.
That's why dogs look so happy.
That's true. That's true. So I know you do a ton of stuff in the outdoors, and you're always backpacking and climbing and doing some cool things. I'm sure that's part of your practice, and also part of the life that you've chosen to create for yourself. What do you recommend for people how to create that work-life balance? Or I actually don't love that phrase, to be quite honest with you.
Oh, the new term is blend.
Yeah.
It's all about work-life blend.
Yeah. Because balance is two things that are opposed to each other. But how do you help people figure that piece out in their lives?
Yeah. I think the thing I love most about the outdoors is how human it makes me feel when I'm there. We spend so much of our time in this construct, a box, and making a living so we can pay our bills, that we completely lose touch with who we are as an animal, this human being that we are. When you get out into the woods, that's all you have. You're left with you and the natural surroundings. And it's an extraordinary place to be because you get reattached to what it means to be just part of the energy in the world, and you bring that back to you into the workplace. So I love taking folks out into the woods. Mm-hmm. I just did a 4-day backpacking trip with a client where we circumnavigated Wetterhorn Peak, a 14er out in the San Juans. Mm-hmm. And it was all about, helping this individual understand how they made meaning of their experiences in a place that had no normalcy to them. They had never seen or been anywhere where I took them before. Okay. And so they got to operate in this whole new space and kind of learn how they think from the beginning, right? And then take that back. And through the process, they learned that they were able to accomplish anything they actually set their mind to. We sell ourselves that all the time, but rarely are we faced with these situations where, it could be life or death, where we do have to push ourselves to accomplish something that we didn't know that we could do. We never had done it before. And you see that happen in real time, and you see the accomplishment in real time from that. It's extraordinary to be able to take folks into the woods, separate from everything that they know to be true, and help them to explore how they think about things and how they feel about themselves and how they feel about what's going on around them. And they get to see, especially here in Colorado, beauty that they never knew really existed. And to be able to sit in it and breathe it in is an experience, I think, that, very few of us get to take advantage of. We live up here in the mountains and we get a lot more of it than most. You find people in the city that have no idea, what it actually means to stand on dirt, what it means to touch a tree.
Yeah. It's just amazing too. I think we tend to stuff our heads with noise. And it's kind of amazing when you get out into nature like that and you spend a significant amount of time either on your own or fairly isolated, how at the start, maybe your brain is going crazy and you're just filled with like that chaos of everything you have to do at work or you have going on at home or whatever all those things are. And then how, at least for me, how quickly that can just reduce to nothing. It's kind of like, well, what did you think about? It's like, I didn't think about anything, and how peaceful that can be. Or I just thought about, a lot of times I used to run ultras and people would say, oh God, you're out there all by yourself for however many hours. What do you think about? And I'm like, running. Like, a lot of times you're just thinking about that one thing that you're doing. And that can be so refreshing because so much of the time, in the chaos of business and family life and everything else, it's kind of cool to be able to just focus on one thing for a little while.
Yeah, one of the challenges I have with clients initially is getting them to understand what it means to have a calm mind. And to your point, when we're just rolling through daily life in modern society, we rarely have the opportunity for a calm mind. I mean, there's so many things to think about. And if we don't know that that's sitting there waiting for us to use anytime we need a calm mind, we don't take ourselves there. It just happens accidentally. Yeah. We're in the shower, we're driving to work, we're walking the dogs, and we have this amazing inspiration. We're like, holy crap, where did that come from? Yeah. Well, it came from your calm mind. Uh-huh. You get out of the woods, you don't have much of a choice. Because if you don't have a calm mind, you might be thinking about, is there a bear around the corner? You're losing your mind around that. One of my favorite things is solo backpacking. Being out 2 days away from my car all by myself in some terrain I've never been in before is my favorite place to be because my mind is totally calm. I get to react to whatever it is going around me any way I want to. To me, it's what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. And we have so few opportunities to experience what it means to be human. Yeah. 200,000 years, we walked around this world with a group of family members, really, and experienced this kind of situation every single day. And then, we were born into a very different world and never really knew that existed unless we got out into it and found it for ourselves. And that's why I love taking people out there, so they can see that this calm mind is a default setting, right?
Yeah.
If you actually stop thinking, your mind settles like a lake, and it's just this glass lake, and every ripple in it is a thought. And when the seas are churning, that's because your thoughts are churning. And if you want it to be calm again, just relax, and it will.
Yeah. It's amazing. I actually did an exercise that I learned from Dean Jackson. He has a podcast called More Cheese, Less Whiskers, which was actually the inspiration for this podcast. I was on his show a year ago. He encouraged me to start Relish This as part of some of the stuff that we teased out during our discussion. And so I think my first podcast recording was September 29th last year, 2020. And right now we're at the 22nd of September, 2021. So closing in here pretty quickly on a year of doing this. But one of the exercises that he talks about is this 50-20 exercise. And the first step to that is to set aside 50 minutes and just write down everything that comes to your mind and just focus 100% on whatever comes to your mind. Just write it down and get it all on paper. And then you can take that list and kind of chunk it up and find commonalities. And the idea here is that you then set aside these blocks of 50 minutes with 20-minute breaks. So you do 50 minutes of intense, focused work on whatever it is, and that could be kind of broad bucket marketing work or writing a blog post or whatever it is that you need to do, HR, but focus on that one thing for 50 minutes and then give yourself a 20-minute break and then focus on either that thing again if you're not done or the next thing for the next 50 minutes. But what tends to happen is people, when they aren't trained in this, they sit down and they're like, okay, I'm going to focus on this thing. And they get going. And then they're like, oh, I got to check my email. And then they're over here and they're like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be focusing on this thing. And it gets easier the more you do it to just stay focused on that one task. And it's amazing that the amount of quality work that you can actually accomplish when you can just turn everything else off and just get hyper focused for some period of time.
I mean, it's meditation. You set an intention to stay focused on something. That's a meditative process, right? Mm-hmm. And then as these thoughts come in, because they always will, thought is fluid just by nature. So a thought comes in and just to ignore it and let it go. And sure as shit, it does. It just goes away.
You go, oh, there's that cat that just across and okay.
And I think
back to your
right. And you find the time that you entertain that errant thought gets shorter and shorter through experience to where these things just come into your head and you just let them go and you just stay on task the whole time. Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of people believe meditation is, thinking about nothing. It's like, no, it's just noticing and then allowing that to pass. I have been doing meditative practice for a while and it's really beneficial for sure.
For sure. Well, I talk to a lot of people about how to get off the cushion, right? Because, it's like I have this phenomenal time meditating for 20 minutes every morning. And then I go get in the car to go to work. And, by the time I get to the office, I'm a screaming asshole again. What happened? And we talk about how it's not the cushion. It's not the 20 minutes. It's the experience of that mindfulness. And you can do that anytime you want.
Exactly.
I heard Ray Dalio, who's this big hedge fund manager, talk about how he does transcendental meditation on an airplane. Yep. I'm like, well, then you can do it anywhere, and all it is a matter of knowing where that calmness is and just tapping into that whenever you want to.
I think it was a Dalai Lama. I was listening to one of his podcast or one of his books. And one of the things that he was talking about was how, meditation doesn't have to be, it could be a breath. It can be just taking one moment to just feel that inner peace and recenter. You don't have to set aside hours or days or however long some people, do meditate, which I think is a great thing for some people to try if that's what you're into. But, just knowing how to take, even a single calm breath can be a meditative experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I totally encourage my clients to meditate because I want them to feel that feeling of what it means to be in that space where they get to punt on thoughts that they don't want to engage with, because that's the key to their stress in life. That's the key to dealing with their email. It's the key to dealing with difficult conversations, is understanding how to deal with those thoughts that flow through your head that you're not really that interested in engaging with.
I can't believe it's been an hour since we started talking. This has just been so much fun. I've gotten just a ton out of our conversation. I hope everyone who's listening today feels the same. So how can people find out more about you and your services and what you can bring to the table for entrepreneurs and organization leaders and everybody out there looking to be their best self?
My organization is called the Logos Group. I'm at thelogosgroup.net online. Jeffrey Kinsey on LinkedIn, probably the two best ways to get a hold of me. Every first conversation's on me. So I'd love to have a conversation and figure out whether or not there's something I can help you with.
Well, I'd encourage everyone to give Jeff a call at the Logos Group. That's THELOGOSGROUP.net. Give Jeff a call. He's a super cool guy. I'm so thrilled that we were able to meet up, given that we do live maybe 7 miles apart, which is just fantastic. So I love having these conversations, and talking is one of my favorite things to do, just exploring new things. But I really want people to take action at the end of the day. All talk and no action just doesn't really change anything. So if you were to encourage somebody to do anything after listening to the show today, what would you have them do?
If anything that we've talked about seems interesting and curious and maybe different than you might have thought about it before, spend some time sort of poking around on that, see what that is. Just knowing that if you're stressed out, all you have to do is take a breath to get out of that is super helpful. So experiment with that. Experiment with letting thoughts go by, see what comes behind it, So that's the thing, at the end of the day, you have everything you need already within you to be the happiest, most content person on the planet. You already have that in you. You don't need anything other than maybe somebody to talk it out with, right? Yeah. So continue to poke around and try and find that place where you are just perfectly calm. And then think about how you got there, because you can get there anytime you want.
I love it. I love the mindset shifts that we can all do to improve the way that we approach everything else in the world. So Thank you so much for being on the show.
No, I can't thank you enough for having me.
Super blast talking with you.
Very cool.
Talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Stu.
Sure. And there you have it, another great episode of Relish This. Thanks again for listening. You can find past episodes of the show at relishthis.org. And remember, if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information on purpose marketing, grab your free copy of my book, Mission Uncomfortable: How Nonprofits Can Embrace Purpose-Driven Marketing to Survive and Thrive. Get your copy now at missionuncomfortablebook.com. Thanks again for listening. Come back next week, won't you?